the courtroom wasn't ready for what struck it. What began as another tense day in the Diddy trial swiftly escalated into one of the most emotionally charged moments yet. It wasn't the attorneys, the press, or even the judge who shifted the atmosphere.
Prosecution's star witness taking the stand, but it was more than that. It was how Cassie took that stand. You could hear a pin drop when those doors opened, and a visibly pregnant Cassie Ventura walking past a man she had not seen in 6.5 years. A man she says violently abused her for a decade. A man the prosecution said trafficked her. Well, she sat across from him, placed her overcoat behind her, turning her body slightly toward the jury, rubbing her pregnant belly throughout her testimony. Diddy, well, he was more fidgety than he was the day before. He was passing notes. He pushed himself away from the defense table and largely sat like that. They never seemed to make eye contact with one another, not even after she was crying about having loved him once and planning and participating in these freak-off sex parties because she feared him and she wanted to make him happy, but feeling worthless, feeling disgusting because she didn't want to do it. Now, with each moment, the testimony became more and more graphic. Her delivery, though, it never changed. It was matter of fact, steady, calm. At times, she was even critical of herself, walking us all through how a 10-album record deal came over a 10-year period of abuse and sexual humiliation. And once you hear Cassie's testimony, you'll understand why the courtroom was so
It was Diddy's own daughters. Right as the most graphic testimony started to unfold, Chance, Delilah, and Jesse, his teenage girls rose up their faces, pale, and exited the courtroom. No words, no signal, just a silent, powerful departure that stunned everyone. You could sense it in the air. Eyes darted, jaws dropped.
Voyeurism. He had everything to do with what she was wearing. She said she would buy outfits from sex shops and see which one he wanted her to wear. And then inside the actual hotel rooms, their apartments where the freak-offs took place, she said that Combs was in charge of lighting. It began with candles. It then moved to studio lighting.
They might say she's lying, but that's going to be a little hard to do with
These cameras weren't recording inside, but journalists described the silence that followed as unbearable. Even Diddy, who had remained largely composed throughout previous testimonies, seemed shaken. His eyes tracked his daughters as they vanished through the courtroom doors, and for a brief moment, his carefully crafted image faltered.
Oh, okay. 82% say victim. 82% say victim. Maybe based on we're reporting on the testimony right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think she is a victim if the allegations are true, but also she is involved in some of the criminal act. I mean, she's getting those prostitutes, right? She's making payments to them, allegedly. She's having them come. So she's involved in some of the alleged criminal activity. And that's an interesting point that wouldn't just apply to her. Other people in his orbit might be some combination of victim and co-conspirator.
It wasn't just the visuals. It was what it signified. This wasn't a remote legal battle anymore. This wasn't about headlines, fame, or reputation control. This was about family. And in that instant, it became evident even the people closest to him, his own children, were not immune to the horror unfolding within those courtrooms.
Makes him unique, though.
Sure, but is that what he's doing? Is he running an entertainment and fashion industry, or is he running essentially a criminal organization?
By the way, we have a poll up right now. You can participate in it. Do you think Cassie Ventura was a victim or partner in this? Ready for this? 82%. Well, this doesn't make sense. 82% say yes. I don't know if that's yes to, I think we need clarification. 82% say victim or partner. We'll get a clarification on that.
By the way,
right now.
But that's my answer to that question.
But what drove them to that tipping point, that answer came moments later. The trigger behind the walkout was a testimony that no one could have truly anticipated. Daniel Phillip, a male escort presented by the prosecution, took the stand with a level of detail that left everyone in shock.
Disbelief.
What made you come here to support Puff?
I'm supporting Puff because he's innocent, and I'm wholeheartedly believing his innocence, and I know he's innocent. So,
You say you know he's innocent.
1,000%.
Mr. Combs feels A, he's innocent, which is why he's not going to plead guilty. B, he's going to be truthful about this case because he wants to portray that to the people who have loved him his whole life. And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general. Maybe it's Black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government. He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what, maybe I can break the model. Maybe I can show the world that a Black man can win, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
His role in the case was already contentious, but what he disclosed sent the entire courtroom reeling. Daniel recounted in chilling detail the private events Diddy allegedly orchestrated, which involved Cassie Ventura and multiple third parties. These weren't chance encounters. According to Daniel, everything was scripted, prearranged by Diddy himself, down to who appeared, what they were instructed to do, and what would happen next. He claimed Diddy sought control over every second, that it wasn't about intimacy or connection. It was about domination, orchestrating scenes like a twisted director and forcing Cassie to endure whatever spectacle he envisioned. Daniel also revealed how he was allegedly flown out to participate in one of these events where he said he met Cassie and observed her emotional detachment. He testified that she hardly spoke, hardly moved, like she had been trained to comply without resistance. The descriptions weren't just disturbing, they were dehumanizing, and the courtroom felt it. This was the moment the daughters left, and once they were gone, the floodgates opened. Daniel claimed Diddy didn't even attempt to conceal these events from his team, that there were people in the room who were simply told to ignore it, that everything was covered up with money, silence, and intimidation. The jurors sat stunned. Some shifted in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. Even veteran reporters said this was the moment things turned grim, like the room collectively realized they were no longer hearing about celebrity gossip, but something far more sinister. Something that couldn't be glamorized, excused, or spun into PR damage control. And the most haunting part? This was just one testimony, one event. And there were more to come. Because what the prosecution hinted next would plunge the trial into even deeper, more disturbing territory. It was meant to be a display of support. Diddy's daughters. Chance, Delilah, and Jesse arrived at court dressed in muted tones, sitting just rows behind their father. They hadn't spoken to the media. They didn't gesture. They simply appeared, projecting unity in a time of turmoil. But by midday, that image shattered. Witnesses say the change in their demeanor was immediate. The second Daniel Phillip began detailing the orchestrated events allegedly arranged by Diddy, their girls froze. One reportedly gripped the sleeve of her sister's jacket. Another bowed her head and stopped making eye contact with anyone in the room. What was being said wasn't just humiliating, it was personal. These weren't just salacious claims against a public figure. These were gutting portrayals of their father, someone they'd grown up admiring, now described in unimaginable terms. Sources inside the courtroom say they tried to remain composed, but as the story intensified, their restraint broke. Reporters noted their faces turned ghost white. Court sketch artists even captured the girls looking away, covering their mouths. And then, without speaking, they rose up. They didn't whisper to each other. They didn't even glance back at Diddy. They just exited, leaving a silence in their wake that hit harder than any testimony could. It wasn't just a moment of emotional collapse. It was symbolic. Their walkout spoke louder than any statement they could have made. It said, "This is too much." It said, "We didn't sign up for this." And maybe it said, "We don't believe this version of him either." Insiders later claimed the girls did not return that day. And while their team issued no official comment, the headlines did it for them. Diddy's own daughters leave court in tears. Family loyalty crumbles in real time. The courtroom had been a battlefield all week, but that moment, that was emotional bloodshed, and what they missed after they left only made it worse. With the girls gone, the prosecution intensified the pressure. What came next wasn't just testimony. It was footage meticulously cataloged, time-stamped and sealed away until that very moment. The freak-off tapes, the rumored videos that had lingered around this case like a cloud of smoke. Now they were real, and the jury was about to view them. While the footage wasn't made public and wasn't shown to the media, its impact in the courtroom was undeniable. The gallery wasn't permitted to view it, but they sensed it. Gasps, hands over mouths. One juror reportedly requested a break after the first clip ended. The prosecution warned that what was on those tapes would provide undeniable context to the testimony heard earlier, and they delivered, described only in courtroom. Transcripts the footage allegedly showed orchestrated events involving third parties and what the prosecution described as clear signs of coercion and psychological manipulation. One legal analyst tweeted, "I've covered criminal court for 10 years. I've never seen a jury look this shaken." Court reporters said that even Diddy looked disturbed, not because of what was shown, but because of the reaction to it. The jury wasn't reacting with curiosity. They were reacting with discomfort, with revulsion, and with a clarity that said, "This is not the behavior of an innocent man." The tapes weren't just evidence, they were experience. They turned accusations into visuals. They gave weight to Cassie's words. They added a layer of authenticity to Daniel Phillip's testimony. And most importantly, they made it impossible to forget. What's said in court can be denied, but what's seen, that's permanent. And after the jury watched, the entire energy of the trial shifted. Next came the ripple effect, not just within the courtroom, but across every screen in the nation, because the reaction outside was just beginning. By the time court adjourned for the day, the courtroom drama had already gone viral. The image of Diddy's daughters walking out, captured by a sketch artist and recounted by publications once neutral on Diddy's character were now publishing deep dives into his past. The Cut ran an editorial titled, "The Empire Cracks When Daughters Walk Out, So Does the Legacy." Rolling Stone released a feature unpacking the alleged tapes, even quoting anonymous insiders who claimed they'd heard about these events for years, but were too afraid to go public. And in a telling sign of the times, even brands began backing away. A clothing line Diddy had invested in scrubbed him from their website. A luxury spirits company that had partnered with him for years quietly deleted sponsored content. Public opinion wasn't just shifting, it was stampeding. Because at this point, it wasn't about being a fan. It was about facing what happens when fame, power, and silence collide, and the world watches it all unravel in real time. Inside the courtroom, Diddy's legal team was struggling. What started as a confident defense, built on reputation, resources, and celebrity polish, was now buckling under the weight of public betrayal, visual evidence, and family fallout. Centered there moment his daughters left court, the defense lost its most powerful nonverbal ally, the illusion of family loyalty. Their presence was meant to send a message, "We believe him," but their exit told a different story. "We can't even look at him," and it shook the jury. Legal analysts commented that jurors were visibly watching the girls as they exited. Some shifted in their seats. Others stared blankly, processing what that moment meant. Because if your own children can't stomach what's being said about you, how can anyone believe you're innocent? The defense scrambled to course correct. They tried to highlight inconsistencies in past testimonies. They pushed for objections. They hinted that Cassie and the prosecution's witnesses had ulterior motives, from financial gain to revenge, but it wasn't resonating. Not after the tapes, not after Daniel Phillip, and not after the daughter's sources close to the case reported that behind closed doors, Diddy's legal team was debating whether to shift strategies entirely, go softer, go silent, or maybe go for a settlement. Because the jury wasn't just skeptical anymore. They looked exasperated, and the more the defense tried to pivot, the more it seemed like they were drowning in the narrative. Even Diddy's body language changed. He stopped nodding along with his attorneys. He stopped glancing at the jury. He started looking down, only looking up when someone directly addressed him. His signature confidence gone. Because now this wasn't about salvaging his brand, this was about survival. And if the next round of witnesses hit as hard as the last, his team might be running out of ways to explain the unexplainable. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, one final witness request was quietly submitted by the prosecution. A name that hadn't been mentioned in weeks. Someone who could alter everything. The trial's revelations have not only impacted those directly involved, but have also reshaped public perception of Diddy. Once a celebrated figure in the music industry, he now faces a legacy overshadowed by controversy and allegations. As the trial continues, the world watches, awaiting the final verdict and its consequences.